Okay. And in just okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerd Church, the show where we read through the Catholic lectionary and see what that has to tell us about the Bible and critical scholarship. And just, let me start over. That was bad. I'm thrown off because today we are not joined by our usual hosts. Aldo was unavailable, so at the next minute, my dear friend Amanda volunteered to jump on and to co-host. So I'll just give her a moment to briefly introduce herself, and then I'll just kind of run through what the show's about and what we're about, and then we'll get started.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I am not Catholic, but
See,
the lectionary
I
for
keep telling people we're Protestant friendly.
um, it's pretty similar to I think it may be exactly the same
Yeah,
to the one we just.
it's the yeah, because Amanda's Anglican, in case you didn't know.
uh,
And
Raised Baptist though, so that comes
yeah,
through
yeah, yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, and the Anglicans actually use it's called the Revised Common Lectionary, but it's very similar to the Catholic lectionary. The only difference is that there are certain feast days that, like actually the one that we're on today, that get left off. So on an ordinary Sunday, it would be the same, but I don't think that y'all have special services for today.
I, Not that I know of.
Yeah, yeah,
There
that
wasn't anything at church today.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, so Amanda jumped on. So this is Nerd Church, the show where we learn about the Bible and engage with critical scholarship using the lens of the Catholic lectionary. And this is one of our special episodes because today is, if you are Roman Catholic, is the feast of Mary, the Holy Mother of God. For Eastern Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and Lutherans and Anglicans, this is still technically the Feast of the Circumcision. So the brief little bit of church history there is that early on, January 1st was celebrated as, from about the 5th century onwards, was celebrated as the Feast of Mary, Mother of God. And then later on, it got kind of, Mary, Mother of God, kind of dropped by the wayside. And then the focus then became on the circumcision of Jesus, which, of course, because of course, January 1st, we're 8 days after Christmas. And in case people are not familiar in Jewish custom, both today and in the First Temple period, the 8th day is when a baby boy is circumcised and given his name. So in the Middle Ages, that kind of became a major Jesus holiday. And then that was finally formally adopted by the Catholic Church in the 15th century with the Council of Trent. Stayed that way right up until 1970, or sorry, until 1960, when it got changed back to Mary, the Holy Mother of God. And there's some fun church history that goes into the adoption of that title that we can go into kind of after we've sort of talked about the readings just as readings. Because one of the things that we like that is always worth highlighting, I think, on the days that are like holidays is the way that all of these readings, as you'll see, are sort of very carefully curated to kind of lay out the sort of scriptural evidence for this particular Marian feast day, and then also you'll kind of see the connection to the earlier feast day of the circumcision, and also just kind of tying everything together neatly in a really interesting way. So the way that we usually do this is I go through the readings, and then we sort of talk about them sort of collectively, and then kind of just react to things one by one. So our first reading is from Numbers 6, 22 through 27. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and his sons and tell them, 'This is how you shall bless the Israelites. Say to them, the Lord bless and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. So shall they invoke my name upon the Israelites, and I will bless them.'" And then the responsorial psalm is Psalm 67, and we're looking at 2 through 8. So the psalm, the response, which I, again, will not require anyone to read back. Normally, if this was being read in a liturgical setting, the person would, the lector would read the response, and then everybody else recites the response at the end of the paragraph. But we don't.
I could pull it up and do that. We could do that.
Okay.
So
it's "May God bless us in his mercy." That's all you have to say. Okay.
Oh, may God bless us. What?
May God bless us in his mercy.
May God bless us in his mercy. Okay.
Yes, I read, "May God have pity on us and bless us. May he let his face shine upon us. So may your way be known upon the earth, among all nations, your salvation." And then you say,
"May God bless us and show us his mercy."
"May God bless us in his mercy."
And his mercy. Okay.
Yes, okay. "May the nations be glad and exult, because you ruled the peoples in equity. The nations on the earth you guide."
May God bless us in his mercy.
"May the peoples praise you, O God. May all the peoples praise you. May God bless us, and may all the ends of the earth fear him."
May God bless us in his mercy.
Yes. Okay. Now we have, now our next reading is Galatians chapter 4, verse 4 through 7. Nice short one. "Brothers and sisters, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son, born of a woman under the law, to ransom those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. As proof that you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, 'Abba, Father.' So you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then also an heir through God." And then our final gospel, and then the gospel rather, is Luke chapter 2, 16 through 21. And that one we have the shepherds went in haste to Bethlehem and found Mary and Joseph and the infant lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known the message that had been told to them about this child. All who had heard it were amazed by what had been told them by the shepherds, and Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, just as it had been told to them. When 8 days were completed for his circumcision, he was named Jesus, the name given to him by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And so those are all the readings. So again, we're still in Christmas. So we've got, the nice little piece of Luke. Now this is interesting to me that we're still going back to Luke, because year A is the year that you read Matthew. So most of the gospel readings for 2026 are going to be Matthew, except that you have to have a little bit of Luke, because the nativity story, of course, as we know it, is about half Luke and half Matthew. And the other thing that I think is interesting too is we have this kind of tension in the readings where you've got Paul, who's talking about freedom from the law, but at the same time, you've got the book of Numbers is an unambiguous blessing on the Israelites. And then you've got Luke, talking about Jesus's circumcision. And it's obvious Mary and Joseph, it's like, yeah, the baby's 8 days old. You go down to the temple and get him circumcised because that's what you do. And it's kind of this interesting tension, as we're talking about just kind of the relationship of Paul to Judaism, the early Christian community to Judaism, and kind of the way that modern Christians have to kind of thread that needle of, understanding that ultimately our religion in some sense is rooted in Jewish practice, but at the same time, it's not Judaism anymore.
And hasn't been for a long time.
And hasn't been for a long time. And there was kind of a whole history in that very, very messy breakup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally, if Aldo were here, he would be the one who would handle numbers. But he's not. So, and really, I kind of feel like Numbers, this reading from Numbers and the Psalm, in a way, are just kind of filler. It's like you have this nice little blessing, and that's kind of not a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting to me, because with the between the passage in Luke and the passage in Galatians, is that we're talking about a son who is born and also an adoption.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting juxtaposition that um, Christ himself was born a son so others could be,
Adopted.
in Paul's language, adopted.
Yeah. Well, and of course, the interesting thing here is that effectively Joseph is adopting Jesus,
Hmm.
right? I mean, even though, like, obviously what's going on isn't like a formal adoption, really. It's
Right.
just that at some point, Joseph and Mary have just decided that they're just going to kind of pass the kid off and not say anything.
Right.
It is probably the best historical reconstruction of what's going on.
Well, I can't imagine that if you told people, people would be like,
Yeah. Well, I mean that's kind of the whole point of of this of the stories about everyone's reaction to Mary's pregnancy is, it's really obvious that, like, you've basically got Joseph who gets told by an angel in a dream that everything's okay.
it's fine. You're
Yeah,
fine.
it's fine. It's fine. Really, you're fine. Um,
You're not Hoshea, okay? It's fine.
yeah, it's fine. Now, now one of the things that I did want to talk about, because when we're talking about the letters of Paul, one of the things that always comes up is, did Paul really write that? And Galatians is one of the letters of Paul that there is widespread consensus among critical scholars, among historians, among, like, basically everybody, that Paul really wrote this one. And he's writing it so, like, in the 40s or 50s, so probably, 10 to 15 years after the crucifixion. And one of the reasons why people identify this as being Paul is that one of the major concerns that Paul has in here is whether or not Gentile converts are bound by the law, right?
Hmm.
Which was kind of a really hot issue in the first century, that by the second century, when some of the letters that are regarded as being either not Paul or of kind of dubious provenance,
Hmm.
um, aren't really as interested in that. And by, like,
Yeah.
the, like, early second century, that wasn't so much of an issue anymore. At that point, it was obvious that whatever was that Gentile converts were not going to be bound by the law.
Hmm.
And, and of course, with Paul, the question is always, like, basically, what's Paul's problem? I mean, like, if we're just, being really honest here, why does Paul think the law is a bad thing? And, a lot of ink has been spilled on this. And the suggestion that kind of makes the most sense to me is that, basically, there are people who, in terms of their religious practice, thrive on order, right? They like
Hmm.
having the law. They like knowing that there's a blessing that you say before you eat a piece of bread.
Hmm.
There's something that you do, when you put on your shoes, you do it in this way because that's the way you're supposed to do it. And everything is neat and ordered and orderly. And they find that profoundly comforting.
Hmm.
And then you have people that, if hand them a schedule of what their entire life is going to look like daily, for the next 10 years, they feel like they're in a straitjacket,
Hmm.
right? And I think that it's possible that Paul was just one of those people that, for him, law feels like a straitjacket.
So I don't, I tend to think that he doesn't really have a problem with the law per se. I think I think he's just early on the this is not just a weird sect of Judaism.
Yeah.
Uh, because he appears to have lived subject to the law himself.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come across to me as like this is a wrong or bad thing. It's just that this is unnecessary for this group of people.
Yeah. It's well, and I think,
Like,
yeah.
like if you grew up in it, like fine,
Yeah.
it's fine. Like it's your thing, do your thing. But like if you've come from like regular degular paganism, and now you've like, no, this Jesus thing, this Jesus guy really am into him. Like it's not a conversion to Judaism, it's a conversion to a Jesus follower. And so
Right.
then the
Right.
law
Right.
just doesn't matter for, well, you and I.
Yeah, exactly. And
So I don't know necessarily because I think sometimes people read Paul as very judgy, and don't get me wrong, I think he is a little judgy, but who isn't, you know,
Mhm.
whomst among us. Um, but I and maybe this is me projecting onto Paul a little bit, but I like to like I got to sit with stuff. I got to work it out. And like, you know, now of course I'm not writing to the churches.
Yeah.
So it's more internal. So like, you know, in 2000 years nobody's going to be sitting around going, Samantha was kind of a bitch.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
believe?
Yeah. Well, and
But
yeah.
because I mean it's like particularly like Romans, you can he's like working it out. Like
Well, and
he's
that's a yeah, yeah. But yeah, exactly. And it's, and definitely in Paul you can kind of trace this, right? But you also get the idea that he does ultimately think that the law is kind of pointless. And I think that although I mean, yeah, definitely, like, the idea that Paul is the one who comes up with, faith not works, it is just silly, right? I mean,
oh,
Paul is
definitely.
not teaching faith-based salvation, but at the same time he also, I think, kind of looks at the law as a constraint rather than a vehicle, right? Like, even if you're under the law, it's something that that it might be something that he personally has to do,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that there's not a love for for just this kind of very ordered practice, right?
No, I agree with
Yeah,
you there.
yeah. And I think that that's kind of what I always see Paul as sort of struggling with. And I think that in a way that kind of creates this tension that is really present in Christianity, especially forms of Christianity where you do have an institution, right?
Hmm.
Where you have this kind of, like, you have this kind of tension between the idea of, okay, well, we have to have guardrails, but how rigid can the guardrails be? How responsive can they be? What's the line between, you have to have some kind of proper practice, and how much can you innovate within that proper practice? And I think
So
that that's all kind of, to me, a lot of that tension is kind of something that Paul started wrestling with and that we really still haven't figured out.
Oh, no, because so in the traditions I grew up, the tradition I grew up in, it's very like the faith-based, like you say the magic prayer. Um, as much as I hate when people do that, but that's a whole other conversation. Um, but you say the magic prayer, and then there's all this talk about legalism, but we can't help ourselves.
Yeah,
We really want, because there's that whole, so if you believe something, there should be marks on your life.
yeah,
Like just anything you believe to be true is going to show up in the what you do. And we want to know, not only are we in the right bounds, but like we want to be able to tell if the other person is in the right bounds. And so we can have this rule, this checklist, just that we make up.
yeah.
Because I have to tell you, I have experienced some crazy rules. And my parents were grew up in even more like cult adjacent like version of
Yeah,
um Baptist theology. And some of the rules. I mean, my mom took a college class, class at college about how to alter your clothes to make them more modest, to fit a very narrow standard of what was appropriate.
yeah.
To wear it not just to church, but like
In
everywhere.
general, yes.
Yes.
Wow. That's
You told me that? I was a teenager. I was like, bro, where did you go to college again?
yeah.
That sounds horrible. And my dad went to Bob Jones, which was less horrible.
Wow.
Tells you a lot, right?
When Bob Jones is less horrible. Yeah. Yeah. So and of course yeah. And anyway, so of course, the other reason why we have probably this reading from Galatians is it has this really nice reference to Jesus having been born of a woman,
Mm-hmm.
which is, of course, one of those things that Catholic scholars love to say, see, even Paul, who has a very, even Paul is thinking about the incarnation and is thinking about Jesus's mother, right? Um, and I think that it's that now it would be a mistake to say that Paul has a high Christology, right? And there's always a tendency of Catholic apologists to see it's right there in Galatians, Mary's the Theotokos, right?
Yeah.
Theotokos is of course a fancy Greek word that means God bearer. um but I think it does kind of give us kind of an interesting data point of how we go from Paul writing this letter in the 40s to like 400 years later, you have the Council of Ephesus, in which Mary is the Theotokos becomes dogma. Because it kind of shows us, even at this very earliest point, that Christianity is going to insist that Jesus was born and that Jesus was fully human,
Uh-huh.
which of course is the great project of the first like 500 years of Christianity, is figuring out, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? um which is where we kind of end up into the cool church history part, because of course the doctrine of Mary being the mother of God, not just the mother of like Jesus, the human person, is something that really comes out of these like third and fourth century debates over the nature of Jesus, right?
Mm,
Because if your understanding is that Jesus was a human who, like, in some way had his nature replaced by a divine nature, or if Jesus, like, basically instead of having a human soul, Jesus was like just divine, like inside where it counted, right? In that
uh-huh.
case, Mary only produces the biological meat suit, right?
Right.
But if Jesus's nature is human and man at the same time, bound together in a union, then Mary has to be the mother of God also. And that was kind of the big argument of the late fourth and early fifth centuries. And you have this dude running around named Nestorius. Nestorius was the bishop of Antioch, and then he became the patriarch of Constantinople. And this is also kind of at the point where the Bishop of Rome, who is by this point, we're by this point we have a pope, like kind of in the modern sense, right? Where you've got a
Mm-hmm.
dude who's the Bishop of Rome that everybody agrees is in charge for some value of the term in charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and but there's also this idea that the Patriarch of Constantinople should be kind of like, he's like second, right? Or at least the Patriarch of Constantinople thinks that the Patriarch of Constantinople is second. There was debate, and we end up with a schism about 500 years after this. So anyway, Nestorius, he's born, I should say, in 386, dies in 451. Um, and his idea was that Jesus has two natures, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those natures remain distinct and separate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I always think of Nestorius's model is it's like, okay, you've got a cell, right? And you've got the mitochondria and you have the nucleus, right?
Yeah.
And they each have their own DNA, and they each do their own thing in the cell, but they're separate,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the view that ends up becoming dominant is that basically it's like if you mix together Cool Whip, and if you like mix together Cool Whip and Jello
Mm-hmm.
together to bind them to make a salad, you have the Cool Whip and the Jello, but they're inseparably united into Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And either I got that right or I've just invented the Jello heresy. The Jello salad heresy.
Well.
Because I'm pretty sure that whenever anybody tries to explain either the nature of Jesus or the Trinity, they usually end up coming up with a new heresy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
So
Probably.
anyway, so Nestorius has his separate but connected view
Hmm.
of of Jesus. And he actually gives an entire whole ass sermon against the Theotokos, right?
Tell us how you really feel, Nestor.
Yeah,
Tell us how you really feel.
yeah. So Nestorius gets up there and he's like, no, the Theotokos is not a thing. Quit trying to make it a thing. If you want you, but and this is where it gets wild, right? Is that Nestorius is like, okay, well, you can call her Christotokos, right? She's the mother of the anointed one. She's the mother of the Messiah because, like, in her womb, she still formed Jesus's meat suit. And that's pretty good, right?
I mean, it's pretty special.
Yeah, it's still pretty special. So, just like, but just like calm down. And I think part of this too is kind of everybody is acutely aware of the fact that if you keep pushing Marian dogmas too far, you can get into polytheism really fast, right? It's like basically it's like you're just going up to the it's like how close can you go without actually going over, right? And
I mean, this is the standard Protestant line about Marian devotion, right? This
and
is
of,
just fancy idolatry.
yeah, and of course the Catholic response is no, because we have spent like 2000 years figuring out exactly how much you can honor and respect and love Mary without idolatry, right? Because that was the whole thing with like saying, okay, we're not going to use co-redemptrix as a title, right? Because
Wow.
okay,
Wow,
okay,
wow, whoa, 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 what?
okay. Let me explain. Okay, co-redemptrix is the idea that like basically, okay, properly understood, the doctrine is that Mary, by deciding to be Jesus's mother, right,
Uh-huh.
has a unique and special role in salvation history, right? Like
Mm.
basically to a degree greater than any other human being, right?
This would not beat the polytheism allegations, I have to
Well,
say.
and see that's the problem, right? Is that the doctrine by itself is fine, right? Because it's saying that like Mary is a human being, right?
Right.
Kind of like the same way that like in academia you would have like a co-author on a paper, right? Well, the co-author on a paper might be like, we needed somebody who knew about this one very specific thing, so we called this person up and said, hey, is this even a thing? And they contributed their part, and so they get like partial credit as co-author, right?
Well, in the hard sciences, what you're talking about there is the somebody who belongs in the acknowledgement sentence section.
Well,
You get a
okay,
special mention.
okay. Exactly, and that's the thing. So it's like basically Mary's in the acknowledgments, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
She belongs there,
Yeah,
defo.
Yeah, and the thing is that so it's like basically if you're speaking Latin, co-redemptrix doesn't imply equality, right? If you're speaking English or most other modern languages, co is like your coworker, right? You're not going to describe the president. So if you work for a company, you're not going to say, oh yeah, me and the company oh yeah, me and Bob were coworkers,
Right.
right? So
Hmm.
so basically what happened is that the very short version is that they were like, okay, the doctrine's fine, the title is like a no-go, like don't call Mary co-redemptrix, right?
This will end badly for us all.
This will end badly, right?
Yeah.
So that was the document that was released a few months ago to great wailing and gnashing of teeth by people who think that ecumenicism is a bad thing. Yeah. So anyway, so the point is that that was essentially the argument that was going on over the title Theotokos, right?
Hmm.
Is it's like, okay, is this going to cause people to get weird, right? And Nestorius's answer was, this is going to cause people to get weird because it's going, but again, the fight is actually not so much over Mary per se. The fight is actually over the nature of Jesus, right?
Uh-huh.
And therefore, what you believe about the nature of Jesus, then you have another logical issue that you have to figure out, which is, what does that mean for Mary, who had to be a human being who was, you know, who be basically when we say that Mary is Jesus's mother, what does that mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically the consensus is finally that that means that Mary is the mother of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's the mother of Jesus, and therefore she's the mother of God because Jesus and God are united.
Right.
And it and then so basically there is a big council called in Ephesus in 431. Um, Now, usually I like reading the accounts of church councils because they're usually really fun, because there's a whole lot of like shade against like random religious practices that were going on in this place, and they're like, no, don't do that. Yeah, the proceedings of the Council of Ephesus, and I'll go ahead and put a link for those in the show notes in case anybody wants to be bored. They're actually super boring. They're just like, this is the dogma. Nestorius is wrong. If anybody is wrong, they're excommunicated and anathema. That's it. Yeah, yeah. So, but there's not a lot of amusing information in there.
No fun
Uh,
conversations.
yeah, no fun conversations.
No,
Oh,
no punches thrown.
no punches thrown. This is very much in the sternly worded email phrase. I did want to include, can you see my screen now?
Nope.
Can you
Oh,
see it?
yes.
Okay, now, okay, yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to show this really lovely icon. This is this is a modern Byzantine style icon. And
Uh-huh.
this particular pose is Mary Theotokos, right? So you've got Mary,
Oh,
and then she's holding baby Jesus, and he's got he's got his hand up in the gesture of blessing, and it's very sweet. And then I also, just because I like maps, um, this here where it's, if you can see my cursor where it's pointing to where it says Izmir,
uh-huh.
that is the modern city that is now that at the time was called Ephesus.
Ah,
Yeah. And I think it's always good, just sort of, especially when we're talking about the early church history, to talk, to just kind of take a minute to look at a map and realize that, like, this is something like Christianity at this point, like Rome, is almost like kind of the edge of like, it is almost the edge of the Christian world. Like
right,
Christianity is happening in this part of the world,
right.
especially when we're really early on. Um, and did you guys eat already? So you have, so you have, this Council of Ephesus. Now, I do want to just kind of briefly touch on, there's a lot of sort of modern neo-pagans will point out that there was a big old temple to Artemis at Ephesus at one point, and that maybe the devotion to Mary was partly a carryover from that. And historically, that just historically the dates don't quite line up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that temple was essentially not there and hadn't been there for a couple of 100 years by the time the council takes place.
Right.
Um, you know, I do, however, think that it's kind of fair to say that there's kind of, if we want to talk about this as using kind of an ecological narrative, you
Uh-huh.
have sort of certain ecological niches, right?
Yeah.
Or sort of niches of belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, people, so there are some people that, have trouble connecting to God using male pronouns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And using male metaphors, and kind of focusing on Mary's motherhood in relationship to Jesus, I think, for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people can be a very useful way to kind of relate to God and relate to Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
kind of in a human way and on a human level. And
Mm-hmm.
also, it means that there's a whole lot of metaphors about maternity and family relationships and that kind of thing that we can understand in terms of Jesus's relationship to his human mother, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, kind of that relationship between Jesus and Mary then becomes a metaphor for humanity's relationship to God,
Right.
in the same way that, the early myths that you have at Ephesus with Artemis are kind of, you have these like devotees, you have these human devotees of Artemis that are using that same kind of humans relating to the divine in a family relationship. So it's not the same. So it's not as simple as, oh, they just ripped off this idea, but it's more that the metaphor is there and people are going to use that and respond to that and repurpose it.
Yeah, I'm always resistant to the idea that like uh, a religion or like a people group stole. I mean, not that it's not possible, but like for the vast majority of the time, it's just like a natural give and take.
Yeah.
It's not this like vast conspiracy to steal
Yeah.
Christmas from the pagan, to steal solstice from the pagans. I no, it's a little more complicated than that. And like, people like having Midwest winter holidays.
Yeah. People like
When
having
it's dark
winter holidays.
outside,
Yeah.
people like to light some lights and have some like,
Well, and actually,
holiness and
yeah.
like
Yeah. Well, and actually,
don't make it weird, okay?
yeah. Well, and actually, it turns out that, if we're wanting to talk about that, that actually, um, in the 10th century, in Norway, the date of the Yule festival actually got moved up to coincide with Christmas. Not the other way around. So, yeah. So you always have this thing, and there's actually these great stories about Paul going to Ephesus and preaching and basically getting into a wizard battle with Artemis.
Love it.
And yeah, and basically there's an earthquake and then her temple just collapses, and I think that we can all imagine the, flawless victory. um
People need to give Paul more credit, okay? I'm a
yeah,
Paul apologist, okay? I'm not even gonna lie.
yeah, yeah,
My own queerness aside, Paul is very much like a first century dude, first century Roman dude at that. Uh Jewish Roman dude. Uh so yeah, he says some problematic shit, but
yeah,
he he means well and leave the old curmudgeon alone, okay?
yeah, exactly.
Don't hate him, okay?
Okay. And on that note, that's kind of all I had to say. So maybe we can
I didn't have
put,
anything prepared,
yeah, no,
so
no,
that's all
that's
I had to
okay.
say
No,
too.
this is all on the fly. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to our rambling, and have a happy new year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you to everyone, and I am going to stop streaming.